I have gotten some questions from folks, but if you have anything else that comes up during the conversation, just put it in the chat or send me a chat. So here are the ones that I know that we're going to cover today. So with that, Carolyn Stilwel is going to talk with us about the differences and similarities between circles and mediations. And this is a question that's come up a couple of different times with folks. So take it away, Carolyn.
Hi. And I invite anyone else who does circles, of course, to jump in and add anything if they like. And I know Kyoko, feel free to jump in, of course. So there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences, right, between the two. I think the main difference that I see between the two is the actual format of the circle. So in mediation, people tend to just kind of, they can talk and there's no sense of this person is going to take a turn, then this person, then this person, like that. In circles, there's more of a set process in that each person gets to take a turn or at least has an opportunity to speak because we use a talking piece that gets passed around. And so there's a set time for each person to speak if they want to. And in mediation, as you know, sometimes there'll be a couple people who will be talking a lot and then you have to kind of try to bring the other person who hasn't said anything for a while in. So that's one of the differences between the two. Another is just, I think, the general, what would be the word for this? Like the general theory, I guess, behind how circles are done and versus how mediations are done, right? So circle focuses more on having more of that intentional space being created, which isn't quite as much in, sorry, I'm at my mom's house and her phone sometimes goes. And so it's a slightly different, right? In circles, we usually start the circle with some kind of poem or quote or breathing exercise. There's an intentional beginning that is set. There's a ritual there that sets this is a new space that we're going to have this discussion happening in. There's a creation of a set of values that everyone is going to use moving forward. And so there's more of a group working together to create the space together that is a little different than mediation. Some of the things that are similar, right, in mediation and same as in circles, values are very important. The way that that shows up is different. In mediation, mediators are thinking about what's important to this person, what's important to that person, what are they really trying to get at, right? You're really looking for those values and trying to understand what they are. And in circle, we're asking people directly, what are your values? And then writing them down and making that part of the guide of how we move forward in the circle. Then, I'm getting so distracted, sorry. So I feel like those for me are some of the big things that pop up when I think about the differences. I know that for a lot of folks also, mediation tends to be more negotiation based, and circle focuses more on building that relationship and trust before moving into creating some kind of an agreement, if that even happens as part of the process. And I think in my experience, it depends a lot on what kind of mediation you do, right? I've seen some mediations where there is a lot of time spent on just understanding where everyone is coming from and what's important to them before getting into that. But there's still sort of an expectation that at some point there's going to be working on some kind of agreement in mediation. And that expectation is not always there for a circle, because sometimes what happens, circle, there's that building of connection and understanding, the sharing of stories, and that becomes all that's what's needed in order to be able to move forward. The agreement itself is not a necessary piece in order to move forward, although sometimes that happens and that can be useful for folks. That just reminded me of another big difference between the two, which is in mediation, we ask folks to speak, right? Especially at the beginning, we'll usually ask folks to tell us what's going on, and they kind of get to share their point of view and their perspective. And then you get into more of asking some clarifying questions, trying to understand again where they're coming from. But you as a mediator are focused on trying to understand what's going on with them and what's important to them and what do they need going forward. In Circle, we do try to understand, of course, but it's more of a shared understanding of each other. And so what we do is we invite people to share personal stories and to share their experiences. And it's through that sharing of stories and experiences that everyone gets to have a shared understanding of each other, including the participants understanding the facilitators and the facilitators understanding participants. I think another difference between the two is how the facilitators and the mediators interact within the circle, right? So as facilitators, we share our own personal stories when we're talking, when we're doing those rounds, and we're inviting people to say, you know, tell us about a time when you had to overcome a big difficulty in your childhood or something. And we would share as well. In a mediation, the mediators wouldn't be doing that, right? We don't usually talk about our personal stories or our personal lives in mediation. It's very much focused on the participants and just understanding them. And so I think there's a sense of a little bit more of a barrier between us when we are doing mediation versus when we're doing circles. There are some similarities though, right, in the sense that in circles, we're still not telling them what to do. Just like in mediation, right? In circles, we're not going to say, oh, well, I think you need to do this, and that's, you know, you should really do that. But we would share our own stories about how we managed something or how we did it, and the same way that anyone else could. And so that can seem like we're telling someone what to do, but it's not the same as saying, you should do this. So those are the things that kind of came to my mind when I was thinking about that. I'd like to invite folks to share anything that they would like to add, who've been doing circles or anything else. Anyone disagree with me on anything? That would be fun.
So this is primary mediation, I think, a mediation discussion, right? As I was thinking about the difference between victim offender conferencing and circles, which is another difference. But maybe that's something not to go into here today.
I think, so circle is kind of like the process, right? And there's a lot of different ways that that can be done. And I think that victim, and please correct me, I know Belinda and Kyoko, you probably know more about this than I do, probably you too, Jermaine, but I think the difference is the process can be used in victim, sorry, what is it again? Victim offender. The person who caused the harm and the person who experienced the harm, right? So in that process, circles can be used. And so it's more of a who's involved versus what the process actually is, I think.
So I had a question because is it true that one of the differences between circles and mediation is that mediation tries to come to a resolution as opposed to circles. Circles can come to a resolution, but that's not the focus of the circle. The circle initially is to develop a relationship with the participants, and then if you get to a resolution, that's okay, but it's not, the circle hasn't failed because you haven't come to a resolution. Whereas in mediation, yes, sometimes you don't resolve the results at the end of mediation, but in mediation, you do look forward to some type of resolution. Am I correct in assuming that?
I think that I kind of agree in the sense that certainly in circles, there's no expectation that there has to be an agreement or that will even be a part of the process. It can be, But you're right, the goal is more to create that connection and understanding, and that can lead to other things. In mediation, I think that a lot of times participants and even ourselves as mediators come to the table with the expectation that there should be some kind of agreement, but I don't personally think that that is something that is necessary in mediation, right? Because similarly in mediation, I'm sure folks who've done several of them, you've come across one where they will have this conversation and they'll talk about it, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're fine, and they don't really need that agreement to move forward. Or they'll have this whole mediation, they leave the room angry, and then later on you happen to find out that, oh, they're getting along. They really just needed to be able to have that understanding with each other being built. So I don't think a mediation that doesn't get to agreement is a failure per se either. And I see Michael and then Mary.
Yeah, I had a question and I guess confusion also over the issue of neutrality. This is very important for the mediator to the extent possible try to be a neutral facilitator. And I'm wondering, in terms of the circle keeper, where that falls.
For me, what that looks like is the circle keeper can share their experiences, right? We can talk about ourselves and who we are, but we can't tell other people what to do, right? And I feel like that's just kind of a life, a way of being, right? Like you really can't tell other people what to do. Like it's not going to work no matter what. We can try and it won't work. So I mean, it's that sense of we really don't want to be telling people what to do, but we can share of ourselves and be ourselves honestly. And I think there's a little bit difference in that with mediation, because we don't share as much of ourselves in mediation, and we're encouraged not to also, right? And in circles, we're more encouraged to share who we are and what we think about things and what are our experiences when we were kids, that sort of stuff. And then I see, I think it was Mary and then Margaret.
Again, I come from a different experience and a different training. I started in a Native American peacemaking court system. And in there, using the circles, there wasn't an agreement to come to. And that was mandated by the court and was given to the court. And they were in contempt of court if they didn't follow it. And the follow-up that had to be done. But when it was just two people who didn't know each other very well and came together, then they would sit and talk and get to understand. So it seems that there are different kind of circles, and I don't know if that's brought up very much. There are some where there's a very definite kind of issue going on, and there's some agreement that should come to. And then you have some people, like new neighbors, that don't know each other very well and need to talk more. So the circle keeper needed to know what kind of circle needed to be developed and handled. The result with the tribal court was that everyone was going to be healed and whole and in a different place. Kind of vague terms, but that meant that there was no problem anymore. The problem was solved. And however that was done, and that's not necessarily by it's whatever the people agreed. It's not what we in our world think is an agreement, like from the court. So my experience is just different. I thought I'd share it with you.
And I think that something that we see also in circles, right, is especially when I do a lot of the cases with teens and parents and such, right? Cases where they do know each other a lot, but then there's a growth, there's a change happening, and they need to sort of rebuild their connection and understanding with each other in order to move forward. And so sometimes there's that occurs there even when we do have the people that know each other. But I think that your point that there's different kinds of circles is really important, right? There's a lot of different ways that this can be done. There's no one right or wrong way. Just we have we come to a shared understanding in each group about how we want to do the circles and how we want to move forward so that we can support each other and so that we can provide the clients with something that they can expect, right? We can tell them this is what you can expect and they can have that same understanding. That's kind of, I think, what we do. Margaret?
Well, I wanted to say that circles originally came from tribal culture and tradition. And while we don't want to misappropriate, certainly tribal people want us to find better solutions to problem solving. So circles are embraced. Certainly that's not the case with mediation. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Go ahead, Belinda.
I just wanted to kind of hopefully round this question out and just remind folks that for mediation in the state of Michigan is defined by our state court administrative office. So we have very little wiggle room in how we move forward. So our training is rooted and approved by those court rules and approved by the state court administrative office. It is a civil transaction that we're often assisting people, facilitating people to get to. And then the tribal approach of the peacemaking court, connecting with those indigenous practices, using restorative justice, is still a little bit blurry. It's not as cut and dry as I think our traditional court systems would like it to be. So to Carolyn's point, you can hold circles as a facilitator and never say, and ask one question and let the parties do what they need to do to reach the outcome, understanding whatever they gain from it. But I just want us to keep in mind that we're trying to take something that's very, very different and outside the box and fit it within a structured governance of our court system in our society, I believe, and make it make sense. And so I think we're making some strides. We're getting there as people come to circle and they're saying, oh, I do feel better. And they're willing to walk away without that transaction. And that's where it gets a little bit sticky in our understanding. We're just very programmed to believe that an outcome is a transaction, where an outcome in the circle space could be just about anything that the parties want. And I know it's, we're still getting our heads around that and getting comfortable with that concept, but we do not have court rules that govern restorative circles in peacemaking, for that matter. So I just wanted to add that, and I, of course, agree with what Carolyn has put out.
Any other questions or comments for Carolyn? Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. I love hearing your voice, and that was very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. I thought I saw maybe Mary's hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add, one of the biggest differences between a circle in the tribal area and a circle in our area is that culture knows how to speak from the heart. That means they know how to get to what their issue is, and that we have to create, it seems like in our world, something to get people to that point if they can get there. So it's very natural in the way they're raised. That's all.
Well, thank you. I think that's an important point that I know I've heard Belinda talk about before, right? The importance of matching our process to the culture of the people that we're working with, right? And so it's important to recognize that we're trying to work within in culturally appropriate ways. So thank you.
Anything else from anyone before we move on? Well, thank you for that. And next, we were going to get some folks asked for an update on the restorative justice program, and I think Belinda and Jermaine are going to handle that. You're on mute, Belinda. You're on mute, Belinda.
Sorry about that. I haven't Zoomed
Yeah.
in about 3 weeks. Jermaine, did you want to start is what I was saying.
Oh, I was asking you if you want to start. Why don't you go ahead and I will
sure.
add where it's appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the restorative justice, the more and very specifically the program that is with the prosecutor's office has gotten started. There have been some deflection cases, and there have been some a low-level amount of cases, and Kyoko could probably speak to that in terms of volume of cases that are being diverted from the district court. So it's something that's very interesting how things sort of morphed the latter part of last year as word got out. So deflection cases got started formally from the prosecutor's office. We had maybe a handful, and I don't want to marginalize the program, but I also want to be clear and accurate that these were low numbers. And some diversion cases came from the district courts, which we did not anticipate. But we took them, and some of you probably sat in and facilitated those cases. But more formally with the prosecutor's office, I think a couple major developments occurred in the latter part of last year. One, the DRC received a $200,000 grant for a 2-year period from Washtenaw County, which are ARPA funds, that's American Rescue Plan dollars. Jermaine wrote the proposal on that. We bidded. We weren't sure what was going to happen. It was a major proposal for us, a large amount of money that was asked for, and we actually got it. So we're really excited, and we have a lot of oversight with that, with those grant funds, and we meet monthly with county folks on our progress with the program. And there's, some of you probably have experience with government funds, grant funds, it's a lot of reporting is required for that. In that proposal, it will allow us to hire staff. So we're in the process of that. We're literally beginning that process of interviews in the next week or so. So some new staff will be on board, or something will change, and those announcements will be shared with all of you, all of our volunteers and board members and all of that when we get through that process. The grant will allow us to do some additional training. One of those trainings that we'll offer to all of our volunteers will be around trauma, because we know that across the board with our cases, and we've been watching this for years, just didn't have the money to do anything about it until now. But over the years, we've noticed that the people who come to, many people, not all, but many people who come to our services have experienced trauma. They're in court cases because of the trauma, and even in civil cases, some people are filing lawsuits because of life circumstances, quality of life issues. They're trying to squeeze money any way that they can, or they can't pay their debt and they're being sued, and there's an element of trauma there. So I'm not asking any of us to be trauma experts, but I think we need to be enlightened about what that means. Understand the terminology, and maybe that will inform us of how we ask questions, or the following question, so that we can better understand the full story of the individual in our circle or at the mediation. So we're looking forward to that coming. Another thing about the grant is that we will have the prosecutor's program evaluated. The efficacy of using restorative justice in cases of harm. Someone has harmed another person. Is this really an effective approach? We do believe it is. Everything that we've researched to get to this point suggests that it will be, and we want to make sure that what we're doing is effective as well. So we'll be looking into getting an independent person to evaluate the program. So I'm excited about that. I think it gives our program a lot of substance and is pretty robust. Oh, and another thing that came on, I think I may have shared this with some of you late last year, the Circle Keepers specifically, we have a local administrative order that that got approved late last year in December, I believe November, December. A local administrative order means that the chief judge of our circuit court, Carol Kunke, along with the prosecutor's office and the public defender's office, came together and drafted language that will protect the drafted language to execute the diversion program. So the prosecutor says, we want to divert this case. They file a petition in court, ask for the diversion, the court agrees to do it. And what this order allows is that the case can be on hold for 18 months, as the prosecutor said in the original program design, and that it will go into a facilitated intervention with the DRC, restorative circles, and everything we do before the circle, at the time of referral, in the circle while you folks are doing it, and after the circle, any communications after the circle, maybe we check up, follow up with our circle participants, will be protected. It will be privileged information between the DRC and the participants, unless someone waives that privilege. Say one of the parties says, hey, I'm okay with the DRC sharing this information with another party, the court, an attorney, or whoever. It protects our files. It will protect the notes that you take, because facilitators take notes to follow the conversation. It will protect your notes. So in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it is the most protective thing that we have as an alternative dispute resolution process in the state of Michigan. In my opinion, it's much more robust than even the mediation. So to get the Supreme Court to review that and give us the thumbs up and green light really feels good, and it feels like there's some investment from the justice at our Supreme Court, as well as those at the local court. So while it took us a long time to get to that point, which it was very, patient, it was really straining my patience, the outcome was a wonderful gift for us to feel that our work is seen, valued, and protected. And in fact, some of the other center directors are quite jealous of that right now, because I did share it to let them know that we did that work. So, so that's another wonderful thing that we have. So more to come on the program. Oh, and I wanted to mention that the district courts, a couple of district court judges started to send referrals through to the peacemaking court, and they referred it to us. And it seems, and I'm going to talk to Judge Kunke about this later this month. I've asked I need her clarification on that, because I want to make sure all of those protections are there. But I think what it means is that we have some district court judges who want to be a part of this. Oh, my battery is going up. I forgot to plug in my laptop. They are seeing cases that they want to be diverted as well. So we're working through that. We're accepting the cases as long as the prosecutor gives us clearance on it. So it is still vetted by the prosecutor's office. And we will accept the referral as long as it's appropriate. But that's exciting to know that the circuit court was carrying the ball on this, and then district court judges said, hey, we want to be a part of that. The newly elected district court judge wants to meet with me to talk more about it. He, as you all can imagine, he's just getting on the bench, Carl Barr, and then Judge Miriam Perry out of the Ann Arbor District Court. I happened to see her over the break, and she, or right before the break, and she said that she wants to be a part of this too. So something is happening in the legal community with the judges. They're feeling good about this, and maybe they sit back and just kind of watch things unfold, but then we get to this point of the program design and they're saying, hey, we want to be in on this too. So all are welcome, and I'm sharing those names because if these folks are judges in your communities, one, thank them for their support of the program, and to encourage them and let them know that you are a volunteer of the DRC. It only increases their confidence in what we can do. So I'm excited about that. And Jermaine, I don't know, did I leave anything out?
No, I think you touched some the major points, but did you want to mention something about the equity partnership recommendations?
Yeah, I can do that. And this hasn't come public yet, but the Washtenaw County had an equity partnership process happening all of last year. It feels like it went on forever and ever and ever. But basically what that means is that in response to the crew report, you probably remember that the first year of the pandemic, a report came out that talked about the criminal legal system in Washtenaw County, and they named judges and wrote up some stuff about judges. And I don't remember all the details, but for some people it was very unsettling. Well, in response to that, Ellie Savid and other legal stakeholders said, well, why don't we learn something from this report and see how we can correct things? What can we do differently so that we can be the kind of county that we say we are, and be held accountable to the public? So they pulled together a partnership group, this group of people that included judges, attorneys, nonprofit folks. So I was there. I was one of the nonprofits there, members of the community, and members who have been impacted by the legal system. Either they served time, they were incarcerated, or a loved one was incarcerated. And then there were committees and focus groups and a lot of things happened to get to what we're looking at now. In that list of recommendations, so this committee has now drafted 60+ recommendations of change that will touch the Vera Institute of Justice was the facilitator of that. Thank you. And they got a grant. 60+ recommendations for positive change in our legal system. And some of those recommendations will address restorative justice. So because I'm at the table on that, as mentioned, the Vera Institute was the facilitator, and they're a group out of, I want to say DC, but I might be wrong on that. And Elma Willer-Smith was the chairperson of this group. They talked about restorative justice in a couple of the recommendations around transparency, the use of restorative justice, and a wider use of restorative justice. A wider use. They want members of this particular group is recommending that we explore the use of restorative justice for more serious crimes, and that data is collected, and that we have a dashboard and there's transparency around that data, and that we're making sure that all people who are in the criminal legal system has access to it, or at least know about it as an option. And one of the guiding big reasons that these recommendations are prepared is to reduce disparity in the impact of the legal system. And what we know already is that some people don't even know that certain options exist. So they end up pleading their case and going to jail without knowing about other options. So to reduce these inequities, or to move away from these inequities, these recommendations were designed. And the DRC came up several times in the recommendations of how we collect data, share data, and widen the use of restorative justice specifically. So more to come on that. This report will be made public at some point. It might be in a public square for debate. I'm not sure what the next step is. I know they're beginning to think about an implementation team. But there's a piece of me that is really, really proud that our center is a part of this tapestry and of what justice could look like. And we have skin in that game, and I'm really proud of that. But I also know that we have to get our ducks better aligned. I think we're doing the best job that we can, but I'm already thinking about what more can we do in our data collection at the DRC. We'll do some things differently beginning this year. I haven't talked to the staff about that, so they're hearing it for the first time. But we'll have to do some things differently because we do want to uphold our end of the bargain of this, and we want to be accountable. Accountability is a part of restorative justice, and we want to be accountable as well. So that's where we are, and I see Kathy's hand up, Kathy Gourlay.
This is all very fascinating and good. I have one question and a couple comments. The question is that $200,000 grant, none of it is going to go toward facilities. Is that right? Like that Restorative Justice Center?
Yeah, we're in discussion with it. There's, like I said, there's a great deal of oversight in the money. In the proposal, we did talk about how we can leverage that to have a restorative justice center or some facility for the DRC, and it's still on the table. We just got to figure out how to do it. These are federal government dollars, and we have to think about the fine print of the language from the federal government's perspective and how you use their money, because the county has to be accountable to the federal government on the money. But with that being said, the discussion is still open with the county about the facilities. They haven't closed the door on the idea, and we're still in discussion with them.
Okay. Yeah, and I should just add, Belinda, or Kathy, or to everybody, it's just complicated with capital funds, right? Like through these federal dollars. So that's why we are sort of pausing and we're taking a look at some other options, because we could have to like come back at a later date, may have to repay those funds, right? And so we don't want to get ourselves in a situation where it'll be hard to get out of, right? So that's why. That's why we're sort of rethinking how to use these dollars specifically towards a new location or center.
Could I say something? I
know that Kathy has some comments too. I don't want to lose.
Oh, Kathy, go ahead and finish.
Okay, and then my two comments were, one, that the court rule that's protecting the DRC is also protecting the defendants that come in case they say something incriminating, and so that information can't be used in other court cases. And
I don't have the local administrative order in front of me, but there are some extreme circumstances, like if the defendant says, I'm gonna go out and get my gun out the car and shoot you, of course we have to tell. But the case itself and everybody in that circle is protected with that local administrative order. It is not a court rule yet, but I think it could become, when we have our evaluation of this program, I think a next step for us is to use that evaluation to move forward for a statewide, so this can be a systemic thing statewide. Every prosecutor in the state can do this and have that same protection.
Okay, so it's a local court rule now.
It's a local administrative order.
Okay, and the last thing is that I think one thing that maybe that court rule is missing, and you can correct me on this, is that if there's a judge that wants to do restorative justice as part of their sentence, you know, or like they'll go to restorative justice and then come back and then I'll decide if you need anything more. I don't think that allows for that. It's either complete diversion or,
the local administrative order speaks to the diversion program only, not to sentencing guidelines. It is something that we can ask Judge Kunke to consider. She's still the chief judge right now, so we have to, you know, ask her if she wants to amend that order and include sentencing guidelines. I plan to meet with her this month, and I'll add that to my list of questions, because one of the things that I think is critically important, and this is just, you know, I'm being recorded, so I want to be careful here. I want to make sure that all judges have clarity and understanding of how we move forward systemically with restorative justice. And there are several judges in the circuit court who hear criminal cases, and I don't know what they know. I don't know if they even know. And that concerns me, and that's not to be critical of any one person, but that's how do I get in front of all of them to make sure everyone has the same information. And to your point, Kathy, if they see, if we can say, hey, sentencing guidelines can come into circle, the sentencing can come into a circle. Sentencing circles are a thing. Maybe that is something they could collectively think about and decide on. So this is just the beginning. This program is literally in the beginning. And what Ellie and I discussed privately and what we hope for is that if we can get something going, it will evolve and bloom organically and on its own. We have to demonstrate the efficacy of it. We have to help people understand why it's beneficial to them and get comfortable with it. And that's work in and of itself. But I think there's room for growth over the years. The DRC does not plan to stop this program at the end of the 2-year grant cycle. We just needed that money to help us catapult things forward. And I believe that we're just on our way to something really big and magnificent for the county that will have a statewide impact. I do believe that. And Greg, I'll come back to you, and I know we only have 30 minutes with a lot of other questions. So Greg, and then I'm gonna go back to Gail.
So I just wanted to commend Belinda and the DRC team for the outstanding work they're doing in this area. I mean, this is such important work. And Belinda, one of the other things that I think that, hopefully this work that you're doing will help address this. There are so many families who don't understand the criminal justice system. And when you have a loved one in the criminal justice system, first of all, you're treated like you are a criminal yourself. I mean, like the family itself is treated like they're criminals. But there's so many people, at least that I know of on the East Side, that the families don't understand how the criminal system works, and that's how kids are. They make these silly mistakes when they make these statements or whatever. But a lot of it's because the families are uneducated about how the criminal justice system works. So I think, again, I want to commend you and your staff for getting the grant and all the work that you're doing, with the county, because this is so important and this makes such a difference in our community.
And Greg, to that point, part of our new positions and what we wrote into the proposal is to really increase outreach. We need to educate the community about what this is. We need to do it up. I have always said when I started working at the DRC, one of the things I learned quickly is that people on the east side of the county needed to know us. You have to have a relationship. They needed to see me, they needed to touch me, they needed to smell me in order to trust me. And we intend to do that level of outreach, being in those spaces where many nonprofits do not go, and talk to people one-on-one. If we need to, talk to groups, block clubs, associations. And we have been building partnerships around that. The Supreme Felons is a major partner for us, along with some other groups, youth serving groups, so that we can be in touch with their families.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Gail. I'll stop so you can get to the other questions.
And Belinda, before we move on, Muffy had a comment. I wonder if we, the volunteers, could use our networks to get the message out about our services, if the staff could do a short blurb for us to share.
I think that makes sense. Thank you, Muffy, for suggesting that. We're going to build PowerPoints, and Jermaine has already, she wrote put together a brochure on behalf of the prosecutor, and they did get some printed for us. So we have a couple pieces of, one piece of thing that can be a handout, and we're going to start building PowerPoint. So if you have networks that you believe would be interested in hearing us present, just jot their names on, pass it along to us, so that we want to make that a priority. Going into this year, as early in the year as possible. We really want to make that a priority.
And Audrey had a good suggestion. As for sentencing guidelines, it's complex. Could we get a session on that? So thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we do need a session on that. We're learning as we're building as well. So I think that might be a helpful session just to understand that more.
Any other comments or questions before we move on? Thank you so much, Belinda and Jermaine. Michael has a question. Is the DRC involved with unarmed response efforts in Ann Arbor?
Not involved, but we're on the peripheral of that. Those are another set of meetings I attend. I talked to the board about that early last year. So some of you board members, you may have forgotten, but we are in tune to them, and they see us as a resource too, from a restorative perspective, should the unarmed response process really take off.
Thank you, Belinda. Jermaine put a link in the chat to this DRC's Restorative Justice Program, and I meant to mention that Belinda also had shared earlier a link to the poem that Greg had mentioned, so that's in the chat as well. And Joel has a comment: from a business sales background, video storytelling, serious and light is an ideal method for exposure and education. Of course, this is secondary to human relationships. Thank you for that, Joel. All righty, so now we're going to move along. Jillian's going to give us a brief update on the dog bite and Ann Arbor Police referrals. We had a session on this last year that I know everyone was very interested in, and she's going to give us a little update on it. So, Jillian?
Hi, everyone. I'll be really brief here, just a few minutes to update you guys on how things are going. So it's been about a year since we started taking these cases. Over the period of that year, we've had 5 cases sent over. 1 from the city attorney's office and 4 from the police department. 3 of those cases reached agreement. 1 was not amenable to mediation and 1 did not reach agreement. The cases have sort of been coming to us piecemeal. Like sometimes I'll get a referral from the police officer that's my liaison there, and sometimes other people in the city have kind of like heard about it, and then they'll contact us. And then I'll get a referral, so the process is still being built up a little bit. One of the new additions to the program is that there is a new program in the city of Ann Arbor called Supportive Connections. Well, we can provide a link to Supportive Connections website in the chat when I'm done talking, or I can provide one. And so the Supportive Connections program is a new diversion program with the city of Ann Arbor, where they're trying to send out a social worker to places where they're having a dispute or some sort of issue that the police are interfacing with, as a way of reducing police interaction on non-criminal matters. And so we've met with the Supportive Connection folks in the city of Ann Arbor and decided to sort of have 2 approaches to how we want to receive these cases. So one way is that if there's a neighbor dispute where there's no criminal charges and it's just mostly behavioral or understanding how they want to maintain their relationship and talk about issues that they might have, we can just go ahead and either mediate that case or facilitate that case as a restorative circle without Supportive Connections involved. The new addition is that if there was some sort of allegation from one of the parties that there was a threat of violence made or some sort of escalation that could be sent to the prosecutor's office, rather than sending it to the prosecutor's office, the police department can contact Supportive Connections, and Supportive Connections can send their social worker out there to sort of diffuse the situation a little bit. And then if they want to then send the case over to us to facilitate a circle, we can do that. But we also need to determine whether it's appropriate on our end too. So we'll do sort of a vetting of the case once the Supportive Connections has sent it over. And if it is appropriate, then we can facilitate the circle and just sort of keep in communication with Supportive Connections and the police department about the outcome of the case and how things are going, so that everyone's sort of in the loop about the dispute and what's going on with it. So that's all I have for you guys as an update to the program. And if anyone has any questions for me or Belinda, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Jillian? All righty, thank you so much, Jillian. And we've got about 15 minutes, and I'm going to just pull up the remaining questions, and we'll go through these. And if there are other topics that we haven't covered, please feel free to pass those along to me. I did want to we had some inquiries about the behavioral health mediation services referral. Our center has received 2. One of them, after we got it, it was determined that it was not appropriate for mediation, so we didn't do anything with that one. With the second one, we had a mediation set up, had conversations with both parties, but prior to the mediation being held, the case was settled. So that program is picking up a little steam, and hopefully with a little more publicity, and as more of the community mental health recipients become aware of the program, we'll see some more activity there. Okay, I'll just jump right into these questions that I had. Somebody asked about some guidance around adjourning mediations, and this came up with a small claims case. Sometimes parties may ask if they can come back and meet again, or sometimes mediators might see that some more information needs to be gathered, or something needs to be investigated, or somebody needs to be talked to that can't be reached at the time of the mediation. So a request for an adjournment could come from the parties, or it might be something that the mediators might want to suggest if they think it could, help move the situation forward. From Stephanie and my perspective, anytime that mediators think that an adjournment might be helpful, you can sort of request a caucus and talk with Stephanie or I. Kind of our approach to adjourned mediations would be to get on the call with everybody, to have us participate in the conversation, pull out our calendars and schedule the next mediation within a week. I might go out with 2 weeks if there was a really good reason for it. For small claims, I kind of don't like to get them drawn out too long. We are under an obligation to kind of get them wrapped up in 30 days. So think about, a week or 2. We also always like to have the same mediators involved if that's possible as well. So keep in mind that adjourning is an option if you think that it could be a positive tool to use in mediations. Anybody have any questions about adjournments? And of course, Stephanie and I would communicate with all the parties about the Zoom links and the date and the time and all that stuff. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Should we introduce ourselves as volunteer mediators or just mediators? And this is one that I get a lot of discussion about. Some mediators will talk about throw in the word volunteer mediators. And then some of you have some strong feelings about that you should not include that, the term volunteer. We don't have, as far as I know, any hard and fast rule about that. From my perspective, I don't think it's necessary to introduce yourself as a volunteer mediator. I think for some of the parties, it could add some confusion and also could impact your credibility. Volunteer means different things to different people. They may not understand the extent of the training that you've received and that you are a state certified mediator. So from my perspective, it seems like it adds a little bit of confusion, or that really isn't necessary. Anybody have any other opinions about that, or any comments that they would like to make about introducing ourselves as volunteers? Certainly if somebody asked you point blank, are you a volunteer? Are you a staff member of the DRC? I would say I'm a volunteer mediator, of course, but I guess I'm in the, should we volunteer that information that we're volunteers? Anybody have any comments about that approach?
I think
I'm sorry. I just have a question. To my knowledge, mediators are not certified. They're approved, but I don't know of any actual certification.
Did I misspeak there, Belinda, with being?
I'm not sure that I'm following Zena's.
Well, comment. I said that, we are sort of certified mediators when you go through the 40-hour training.
Oh, yeah. In the state of Michigan, there is no certification. You reach you take part in the approved training, but there's the word certified is not a part of the role. Okay. Is that what you mean, Zena?
Yeah. Sorry to be so picky.
Oh, no.
I just wanted to make sure I understood the comment.
Sorry to not be more specific.
Well, it's okay.
Okay.
It's neither here nor there about the volunteer thing. I know people have different opinions, but I'm kind of the old school that's how we originally were trained to say it. But I find sometimes people are much kinder to me once I say I'm a volunteer. It just changes their demeanor because I don't know, but just a thought.
Carolyn?
I kind of like the idea of sharing that we're volunteers. Kind of like sets this tone of being part of the community more than like being a separate thing. But I mean, I see where you're coming from with what you're saying, right? But I also kind of like saying that we are volunteers when we are.
Greta shared her opinion. I don't see any upside to introducing our volunteer status, only downside. I would say I'm trained by the DRC and regularly attend continuing education sessions. Michael?
Yeah, I think I usually introduce myself as a volunteer, and often, individuals are impressed by that. But the other related question I have, and this varies among individuals, some people say that they are attorneys, but could not provide any, legal advice, etc., or not. What are your thoughts about that in terms of mentioning any other qualifications you might have as an attorney, as a social worker, as a former judge, or whatever?
Well, the attorneys are obligated to do that according to, I think there was a court rule back in 2011 or something. Something changed that they have to say, I am an attorney, but I'm not here acting that way or representing.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments on that?
I think for those of us who are attorneys, in addition to saying that we are, but we're not here to give you legal advice, to say you're a volunteer at the center, I think kind of underscores that and emphasizes that that's not our role. Our role as a mediator is very different from our role as lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just want to underscore what Greta said, that I found that there's some people who don't take the role of a volunteer very seriously. And so I would personally err on the side of saying I've been trained as a mediator and have ongoing education about it. It may be different. Susan's experience would be different because as an attorney, she's obligated to say she's an attorney. But since the rest of us don't talk about what our professional background is, I wouldn't encourage people not to say they're volunteers. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I hate to make this a cultural thing, but I think there's two issues. First of all, I think that when you say that you're a volunteer, you demean the role of the mediator. I mean, like, I think that a mediator, we're trained as mediators to be in this particular position. So I don't think it's necessary to say that you're a volunteer. Also, it's been my experience as a Black man, when you're mediating with white people, sometimes they're less, they regard my position less because I'm a volunteer. So I think sometimes it has a cultural thing. So if I'm if I've been trained as a mediator, I'm a mediator. It doesn't matter that I'm a volunteer. I'm a mediator. But I mean, again, I think it depends on the group you're talking with and who the group is you're dealing with. But it's been my experience that white people generally, and this it's about mediation and a lot of other roles, is a supervisor in my job. People, if you're a Black person, they think less of you if you demean your role.
Thank you, Greg. Any other comments around this hot topic? Thank you all for that. So something to think about. When to caucus, we talked about this, I think, in a recent session, but sort of the takeaway here, I think, is when in doubt, caucus. And caucusing, I've never seen it when it hurt something. I think if you're stuck, I think it's important for mediators to caucus with their co-mediator. And I've seen so many times when mediations look like they were dead in the water and a caucus turned everything around. So I think, some people are more reluctant to caucus than others, but I think when in doubt, caucus, especially if one mediator thinks it's a good idea. The co-mediators can always have a caucus between themselves and talk about how to proceed next. Let's see, the next question, mediators sharing personal information or knowledge about a topic. We sort of already touched on this, that in general, mediators should not be sharing personal information or their depth of knowledge about a topic. I think I've seen or heard some people do this thinking that it might create some kind of connection with one of the parties, but then when in doing that, it could create an imbalance and lose a lot of the neutrality that's so important during the mediation. So again, I sort of think of a Sergeant Schultz kind of approach. You know nothing, even though you might be a carpenter and you're talking about a construction problem. Remember that your role there is to facilitate the discussion and not to provide information about what is good, bad, or otherwise about the information that's being shared. I think as in a co-mediation setting, if you are uncomfortable with the extent of information that your co-mediator might be sharing about a topic or about his or herself, that could be a good time to request a caucus, to just say, hey, I need to take a break for a minute, or there's something I need to talk with you about, and request a private a conversation about, you know, what's going on, what the appropriateness of sharing the information that's being shared. Anybody? Oh, Kathy, go ahead.
It sounds like this might be one of the differences between circles and mediation. Carolyn, do you agree?
Not really.
No, not
No.
telling a story isn't giving,
You
say,
can tell
personal
your story.
information or knowledge about the topic.
No, you can tell us stories about yourself. Like, I think this is where it gets difficult to see the line. But we also aren't going to be telling people like how to do their carpentry or
No. But you're sharing personal information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we're not telling people like details about information that we might be experts on either, because that's giving advice.
Or it could just in a mediation, just that you side more with one person or the other because of your knowledge about a particular topic or a situation. Let's see, there's another chat here. Oh, Diane had a comment earlier. Okay, any other questions about that or comments? And lastly, a lot of the parties raise this issue, and folks have raised it with me. If a judgment is received from the court, what is the process for the parties to get their money? And again, this isn't our role to educate them about this. But folks always ask, and a lot of it is, especially in small claims, people really don't understand the small claims process and think that by filing that small claims and getting that judgment that somebody's going to write them a check. I think it's one of the strengths of mediation. If you do get a mediated agreement, it's sort of kind of more likely that it's going to work out because it was something that was agreed upon by both parties rather than having the magistrate make the decision. Basically what the court does, and they don't even always do this, at least from my understanding, if there's a judgment, they give them this 2-page brochure that describes the very complicated process that they need to enter into if the other party does not pay the judgment. It's a very extensive process to go about garnishment or getting to their assets. And I can share that brochure with folks if they're interested in that. And with that, we are at 1 o'clock. It's so wonderful to see everyone's faces. It was so great to see so many of you at the gala in December. So with it being 1 o'clock and the witching hour, I want to say Happy New Year again to everyone. And I won't see you in February, but we will see you in March. So thank you so much. And we'll be sending an evaluation for feedback, which I would very much appreciate. So thank you.